Hello and welcome to YHTV's Magical Medical Tour. This is episode 65. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Christina Suzama, and with me is our wonderful medical guide, Dr. Glenn Woolman. Hello, Dr. Woolman.
Greetings, Christina. How are you?
Great. I'm looking forward to rummaging through your bag.
Inside the doctor's bag today, huh?
Yes, inside your doctor's bag.
Well, that's always an interesting one. Greetings, everyone. Welcome to Magical Medical Tour. I'm Dr. Glenn Woolman. I will be your medical guide, along with Christina, as we travel through another quadrant of the healthcare galaxy, searching for ways towards optimal health. And today, as Christina already alluded, we're going to go inside the doctor's bag, where I'm going to talk a little, maybe teach a little, give some current events and things like that as we move forward today. And our topic is going to be on viruses or going viral. And so usually when we have a guest, we always invite people to come in and write a question or call in, but I assume we can do the same thing when you and I are just speaking.
Oh, absolutely.
So if you could give everyone the information.
Yes, thank you. At any time during this live presentation, you can feel free to ask a question or make a comment by scrolling down on your screen and typing it into the comment box. Be sure to click submit, and I will read that question or comment to Dr. Woolman. Or if you prefer to speak with him yourself, you are very welcome to join us on our conference line, and the number is 323-476-3672. The ID is 607393#. Thank you, Glenn.
Thanks, Christina. And as you know, whenever we go inside the doctor's bag, you become a very important part of the episode because you represent every person, of course. So I'll be asking you questions along the way to make sure that every person gets it. Now,
I think it's easy to represent the virus.
Well, I will, just to make it easier even for you, I think the concept is, I know that you usually know the perfect answers and they're always correct, but since you're representing other people, sometimes as a sacrifice, you may pretend that you don't really know and maybe answer it in a way so that I'll explain it a little better. Isn't that right?
I wish I knew the perfect answers. My goodness, I'll definitely be far, far off in galaxy by that point.
Well, we'll see. Again, we're going to choose a topic that, has a lot of information in it. And I'm not going to get too deep, I don't think. But you know that I love to talk about cells and the way cells react and everything like that. Mm-hmm. So we're going to go to a cellular level again, and we're going to talk about viruses today. And I hope that at the end of this, people have some kind of an interesting understanding of it. And then there's a current event going on related to some virus that I want to talk about. So that'll be a public service announcement. And then we will talk about ways to maybe prevent viruses and take care of them. And then I even have a health tip today.
Oh, fun.
At the end. So hopefully we'll get to all of that. So viruses, first of all, a definition. It comes from the Latin word virus, actually means a slimy liquid or a poison. So that's how it was known at that point. But there are many controversies about virus. And the first major controversy is even to determine whether a virus is alive or not. So in the definition, according to Webster, an organismic state is characterized by the capacity for metabolism, which means just like us, when we eat food, we can create protein and energy, carbohydrates. We make it all into energy and building blocks. So that's what metabolism is. Also, it's about growth, and we have DNA and RNA, and we grow from a child to an adult. We also respond and react to stimuli. If somebody puts our finger in something hot, we pull it away. If something says something funny, we laugh, things like that. And finally, reproduction. So with those things in mind, metabolism, growth, stimulus, and reproduction. Would you say, Christina, that viruses are alive organisms or not?
Far too much alive as far as I'm concerned. If they're going through all those, it might as well be human.
Yeah. Well, as it turns out, and although this is controversial and some disagree, they don't believe, some of the scientists believe that because a virus can't exist alone, it has to go into another host cell before it can do most of those things. Most people feel that a virus is not actually alive, and it's just a little bit of DNA or RNA, which is the genetic coding material, and it's surrounded by some protein and has a little lipids, things like that. And it isn't really a living organism. It's almost more like a robot that exists. There are other people that believe that it's actually the very first organism in the ecosystem of what we are today. And they feel that it's some kind of a parasite because it can't live on its own, and it requires being in some kind of a host cell. So at the end of it, the answer, is it alive? Is it basically, it has some alive properties and it has some non-living properties. I think the computer people would love to think about viruses because they actually are similar to what we speak of when we speak about a computer virus, something that it really has to get into the computer and then it does its damage. And from a point of view, let's describe a virus for a minute. Let's talk about its size, for example. Because in science we deal in the metric system, let me give you a little bit of an idea of the size of a virus. If you think about a yardstick, which is 36 inches, a meter stick would be about almost 40 inches, a little over 39 inches. Mm-hmm. But the meter system is divided by centimeters, essentially. So if you had a virus that was 1 centimeter in diameter, you would be able to fit 100 of these viruses onto a meter stick. But they're not 1 centimeter. And in fact, they're not even a millimeter, which would allow them to fit 1,000 side by side on a meter stick. And they're not even what we call a micrometer, which would be 1 million. So they're even smaller than the ability to fit 1 million. They're actually in the area of a nanometer, which is a billion, which has 9 zeros behind the 1.
Boy, this is very similar to computers, Len.
Exactly.
Because they've got the little nanobots and everything now.
Exactly. Everything is on a nanoscale. So in essence, to picture this, you could take a virus and put 1 billion of them on that meter stick. So that's about the size of a virus. And bacteria are actually larger than viruses. They're sometimes up to five times bigger. So you can see a virus under a microscope, a bacteria under a microscope, but you can't really see a virus under a microscope.
Wow.
So that gives us kind of the size of what we're dealing with now. There are maybe over 3,000 types of viruses, and they're all defined by their genetics and their DNA and their RNA, things like that. So when we talk about viruses, basically most of us think of them, as you suggested a little earlier, they're pretty detrimental to our society. They basically go in and do harm. And we've seen examples of this in many ways. We've seen the upper respiratory infections. We've also seen the herpes virus. We've seen the AIDS virus. We've seen the hepatitis virus. These are all different types of viruses that cause major problems to us. We know that viruses do cause problems, but part of the question is, why are they here? Do they have any benefits to mankind? What do you think, Christina?
Well, that's always about balance. So I would not know, Glenn. I mean, it's always, uh, I don't know. I really don't know. I
Yeah.
couldn't even guess away from the
Well,
thought of balance.
yeah, well, they do a number of things. One, and some of them not necessarily do we look at them as good, but population control, for example, in our planet. Viruses, have caused certain types of epidemics that have wiped people out. It also provides for genetic diversity. Sometimes when people get sick, those are the people that don't reproduce necessarily. So the stronger of the species begin to survive. And it also has to do with natural selection. So it's very complex. But there's a number of other things that viruses have actually done for us. And one of them is, again, another part of the controversy of viruses is where we're going to see, and what we're hearing about even more and more now, is gene therapy. And let me describe what that means a little bit. As we know, the genetic DNA and RNA code for different programs in our body. And what we found is through studying viruses, we were starting to learn. In fact, that's how we learned about the genome and genetic sequences, looking at simple viruses and their simple genetic coding. So we started learning from that sequence and coding to learn the whole process. Now, let's take an example. Let's say that when the embryo is forming, you get genetics, DNA, RNA from the mother and from the father. And if both of them had, for example, type 1 diabetes, it means they may have a genetic coding sequence that tells certain cells in the pancreas, an organ in the abdomen that produces insulin, not to produce insulin. So the sequence has been disrupted by a genetic abnormal coding. Now, sometimes you can have problems with diabetes because of environment or toxins or other things. But for the most part, in the type 1 diabetes, it's genetic. And it's about a sequence that tells these special cells not to produce insulin. You got that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so now let's say we were able to take a small virus that we were able to control its genetic sequencing in its small little aspect of what it is, and we were able to introduce that virus, which we were able to remove all of the bad things so it didn't get you sick or anything like that, but all it had in it was a mission to go into the pancreas, find the cells that have the incorrect genetic sequencing, and change that sequence. And if they could do that, and then the next set of cells that are produced have a new sequence, and that set of cells suddenly is producing insulin, that means we have potentially cured diabetes. And people will not need insulin anymore because we can, except for other types of cases. But this is what I mean by gene therapy. So you take a virus, you introduce a sequence in it, and it goes into the body, and then it will change sequences that are causing harm or other problems, and then the person is healed. Now, this is obviously going to become extremely controversial also as we move forward. The ethics, when we start looking, and we already know that there are genetically modified organisms in the plant and agriculture and the beef industry, those industries. We're already doing genetically modified work, and that's how we're doing it. We're introducing viruses into plants and cells that are designed to have a special sequence that will prevent them from being affected by this type of a weed killer or something like that. And you already see what kind of controversy we have about corn, for example. Imagine where the controversy is going to go when we start really doing gene therapy.
So,
But
Glenn,
this
I
will
have
also,
a question.
sure.
Because in the beginning of this talk, you had said that, we can see bacteria under a microscope, but we cannot see
Mhm.
the virus under a microscope because it's so small. It's nano proportions. So how is it that we're able, or the scientists are able to remove the bad parts of the virus and be sure that it is the bad parts of the virus
Oh,
before they pump it back into us?
that's a great question. And these are questions that are being asked by scientists and ethicists and physicians all around. But the first part of your question is very important in that when I said they can't be seen under a microscope, that's the normal microscope that we use in colleges and high school classrooms. Those are the light type of microscopes. There's a newer type of microscope, which is an electron microscope, which is not so new anymore. But these can see much deeper. So we can get clear views of the viruses now under special scanning microscopes. And also, we've learned how to stain them so that they come up certain colors. And so we can recognize different parts of that. But that was a great question. But even as we move forward, that is going to be some of the difficult processes about doing viral and gene therapy. For example, if I say to you, we talk about viruses now that might cause cancers. We're talking about the HPV virus. You've heard of that, the human papillomavirus.
Yes.
Which can cause potentially cervical cancer in a young woman. And we also heard an actor talking about oral sex causing a cancer in his throat due to an HPV, the human papillomavirus that was recently in the news, correct? Well, if we know that these viruses exist and they get in the body, perhaps we can then take a benign virus and put in a sequencing program that will either destroy the herpes type virus or the human papilloma type virus or other viruses that might cause a cancer and change their sequencing so that they will either kill the virus or prevent it from changing into a mutation which will cause the cancer, or take the cancer and cure the cancer. So that's another whole area that we're going to be looking at with the gene therapy. It's fascinating. And of course, we talk about agriculture and medicine. There are going to be many possibilities. We have vaccines that we've been using for years to prevent polio and to prevent a number of other diseases. We have the influenza vaccines every year that some people take. And again, these are great things, but because they're viruses, they have controversy. So there are a lot of people that don't believe in the vaccines, and there are a lot of people that don't believe in a number of the things that they do. But in the meantime, there are also the scientists that are working very hard at looking at how viruses can affect us and what we can do to use a virus. There's another group that's doing research, and I'm sure in many different places, but I'm aware of this one only right now. University of Washington in St. Louis, where they're actually looking at and found viruses that exist within the gut of humans. So, we always talk about on this show the bacteria in the gut. We all know there's bacteria, and we all take periodically our probiotics and eat yogurts and things like that. And we talk about the immune system and all of this. So we've known that bacteria exist in our gut for many years, and they allow the intestines and the areas in the intestine when they take the food to break it down, absorb it, digest it, and also to prevent certain toxins from coming into the body. But what we're finding now is that there are also viruses in the intestinal tract. And these viruses and bacteria in our intestines seem so far in early testing to show that they actually are working together to improve the immune system. So I'm very excited about finding that kind of information out. It's also the studies they were doing with identical twins, and they were taking parents, and they were looking at stool samples, just to go over this for a few more moments. They look at the stool samples of the identical twins and the mothers over a year period, taking stool samples number of times a year. And first they looked at the bacteria, and they saw that the bacteria were all relatively similar. The two twins and the mother all had some kind of a similar colony growth of the different species of bacteria. But what they're also finding, surprisingly, was that each group, each person actually had individual viruses, so their own pattern of viruses, almost as unique as a fingerprint. And as we find this out, we're finding that not necessarily are all viruses unfriendly. There's friendly viruses that are out there, and this is good for us to know, because this may help us in learning more about our immune system, which is such an important part of life for us, because that's what keeps us from getting ill and dying of simple parasites and bacteria and viruses.
Wow, that's so
any
interesting.
thoughts so far on what we're talking about?
That is, see, it's back to balance again. Are viruses good or not? I don't know, because it's about balance. And I guess right there, they've found the balance, where if it's working together with the good bacteria in our system. It's interesting. See, they are human after all. There is the good and bad, right?
Well, I don't know about human, but they are a potentially living organism. Not all living organisms are human. But it also, interestingly, when the scientists and the microbiologists do other types of studies in nature, they find, for example, in sea animals and in land animals, I believe, that there are bacteria and viruses also, but they don't necessarily work together as a team as they do in the human. Now, this will certainly, over time, we will learn a lot more about this, but I believe that this is going to give us the information that we need as we move forward in medicine in terms of health and healing, giving us more information and ways on looking at things to help people get cured from diseases and even to prevent diseases, which we really like to do on Magical Medical Tour. We love the prevention aspect and the preparation aspect. So one of the reasons that I wanted to talk about viruses today was that every once in a while, that we hear about different viruses that come out that start going around the world. If you remember back in, I think it was 2003, there was the SARS virus, the severe acute respiratory syndrome virus.
Yes.
Remember that went around the world, and everybody's wearing masks, and people were dying, and they were not eating pigs and looking out for chickens and all sorts of things. Remember that?
Oh, yes. Yes, very much so.
Well, I'm here to let you know that the Center for Disease Control and Prevention and the World Health Organization have recognized that there's a new virus out, and it's very early. It first made its way onto the planet into humans in April of 2012. And this happened, I believe, somewhere in Jordan or in Saudi Arabia, actually. And they are calling it originally looked like a cousin to the SARS virus. They were able to see the virus, and they look at the genetic sequencing, and they saw that it was related, but not quite the same as the virus that we recognized as SARS. And what's happening now is it started in the Middle East, so they are calling it the Middle East Respiratory Syndrome virus, or the MERS. And it's also called a co-virus, CO, and then it's the virus. And the co stands for a recognition of corona. And if you can see that on the cells themselves, these little thorns look like crowns. So that's why they call it the corona virus. And
Oh.
these viruses, and you can see the stains there to make them even brighter. It makes it, they attach into a cell, a regular human host cell, and they then start changing the DNA and RNA of that cell to produce themselves. And that's when they become more like a living organism. So what we're seeing now is when you and I and other people are reading books and going to movies and having dinners and going to work and doing television shows, there are people out there, scientists, epidemiologists, virologists, and people from the Center for Disease Control and the World Health Organization who are very involved right now in this process. They see the potential for a new virus, and it's starting to spread out of the Middle East. It's going around the Middle East, but they've just seen, I think we had a map where some of the places they were showing, they've now seen evidence that the virus has reached France and Italy, and also the United Kingdom, and Tunisia. So a number of other places. So it's starting to spread around the world. And at this point, the Center for Disease Control is not putting out any advisories to say, don't go to these places. It's not at that level yet, but it's just an idea. And as part of a public service for Magical Medical Tour and Yoga Hub, just to keep people involved and let them know if they're planning trips to those areas, they should be aware of that at this time. There is no vaccine going on right now, but all of these epidemiologists and virologists and health concerned people are there studying this, and every chance they get, they're trying to figure out, for example, where it's coming from. And in trying to figure out where it's coming from, the sequences that seem to be showing up in the virus are related to a sequence of viruses that are similarly found in a bat that's that they have in the Middle East. So the theory now is that it's coming from an animal source, a bat, and it's moving. And the question is when it becomes human to human transmission. And now it already has. So it's progressing along its path. They were trying to figure out, what is the process? Where are the clusters? What's going on? And can we eradicate it before it gets too big and gets spread? They thought for a while that it might be that the bats are spreading feces on dates and that it's being spread by dates. But that doesn't seem to be proving out, or at least not yet, because part of the theory right now is that it's not really date season, so it shouldn't be spread that way. But for whatever reason, it has now sequenced itself and moved to a place where we have human-to-human transmission. And at this moment in time, it's been found in a number of countries, as I said, and there are so far 64 cases of the MERS, M-E-R-S virus, 64 cases, and about 38 people, that's more than half now, have actually died from it. And that data is as of yesterday, June 17th, 2013.
So it's not hit the U.S. yet, or North America?
It has at least not been reported in the U.S. and North America, but because people travel, because there are people going to the Middle East all the time and then coming back here, or leaving the Middle East and coming here for the first time, or travelers that are traveling to parts of the Middle East and then here and then back home to other places, most likely it will be reported here. So what's happening is all of the through the CDC and the World Health Organization, they start setting up programs immediately within state and local health facilities so that if a case comes in, or a potential case comes in, where a person becomes what they call PUI, patient under investigation. That's how they start gathering their data. So if people start, in other words, if somebody comes in to an emergency department or to a clinic with a cough, a slight fever, maybe a little over 100, respiratory distress, and they've just recently traveled to the Middle East or been exposed to someone that they know had this virus, then that person would become a patient under investigation, and they would do testing on them, viral testing, to see whether or not that virus is in them. And if it's not, then we report that. And if it is, then we have our first sighting here in the United States. And from there, the CDC and the World Health Organization, state and local and federal agencies start reporting and advising people. And depending on how bad it gets and how virulent it gets, we do more and more things. Then vaccines start getting made, and then people start panicking about there's not enough vaccine. When is it going to get to me? Do I wear a mask? What do I do? And then the other people start talking about vaccines are no good. They're going to cause more harm. Don't take the vaccine anyway. Just do this or do that. So a lot of, again, more controversy within the process of the program.
I mean, so how would one know if they have it, Glenn? I mean, it's respiratory, and we all get coughs and colds, and now it's allergy season here in California.
Right.
And I mean, what are the main signs that one would look for without creating panic, where we do get short of breath? Short of breath.
Right. Well, it's very difficult because it starts out as a virus. And let me say right from the beginning that in some cases, as I said, 38 people out of 64 died, but many of them just got better. So there are milder versions of this. And this has to do back with what I spoke about maybe earlier with genetic diversity in our species, where some people have stronger immune systems. And again, we always look to the people that have the weakest immune system, people immunocompromised, people on chemotherapy, elderly people, very young people. So what do we look for? We look for somebody with a respiratory problem, who has a cough, who has a fever, who doesn't have any history of another problem. In other words, if a person had tuberculosis, they already knew it, or they already had a pneumonia, or they already had a lung disease like a cancer or chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. So if you don't have anything else and you have this, those are the symptoms. And what you have to do is have your own natural intuition that says, when you get a cold, oh, I don't feel too good, and you rest for a few days and you start feeling better, and then you're better. So it's the idea that when you get that cold, not to go, oh, I have MERS or I have SARS or something like that. It's just to be aware of it and to watch carefully. And if it doesn't seem to get better, if it seems to be lingering more than it should with the common upper respiratory rhinoviruses, et cetera, that we see, and some of the allergies that you're used to, then you report it to your doctor, and the doctor at that point will do the appropriate testing to make sure whether it's just a simple virus or the MERS virus or something completely different than that. So those are the things that you have to do. And they have developed some tests already that can be used to recognize the virus, which will help in the reporting of the process. So within that, there's also, are there any other kind of things that you wanted to talk about with the virus?
A question came in. What are the best defenses against these viruses while traveling?
Excellent question. First of all, to be aware of when you are traveling, you are at more risk anyway for symptoms and strains of things that are not in your normal environment. So if you first be aware of where you're traveling, and if they have a history of something, check with the CDC. We had a program on travel medicine that you could look to. There are lots of information there and websites, so people should always be aware. The second thing is, I always believe that you should speak with your doctor before you travel and have medications ready in case of certain problems, and especially if you do have problems already. If you don't have problems, then you can take some general things, maybe an antibiotic, something for nausea, something for diarrhea, a few other things. But If you have your own illnesses, make sure you have enough medication there. And then I always try and remain as clean as possible. I bring a surgical mask with me when I travel. And if I'm on a plane and I hear somebody coughing, I will put the mask on and just try and help a little bit. Certainly, as we learned earlier, with these nanometered viruses that are so small, 1 billion could fit on a meter stick. Even the normal surgical masks, they can get through that. But sometimes it helps a little bit. Stay clean, eat clean foods, wash, stay healthy, don't overdo anything. Sometimes you're traveling and you're on a different time zone and your circadian rhythms are off and you're eating food that isn't your normal food. Some people we know even bring their own food on travels. So these are some of the things that you can do. And just be aware, if you find that there's something going on and you're not feeling well, check in with a local health clinic or physician to see what's going on and be seen quickly if you don't feel it's something normal. That was a good question. And there may be some other things that people have as ideas to do as you're traveling. But I also, that's a great segue for me in the sense that one of the things that I wanted to talk about today also as another part of Inside the Doctor's Bag is how do you stay healthy and protect yourself from these viruses? So it's always about eating well, exercising well, sleeping well, and reducing stress. And that's what I wanted to talk about today for a moment. But before I talk about that, I did want to say one other thing. Sometimes these viruses, especially the MERS virus, we don't know totally how it's being transmitted yet, although most of the time it's usually through coughing or droplets in the air, aerosol droplets, or shaking hands with someone who just coughed. And so it's very important to make sure that you keep your face and nose clean, and sometimes a neti pot or washing out the insides of your nasal passages is helpful. But one of the things I wanted to talk about today a little bit, and we talk about this at the end of each show, you always talk about the metaphor square breath that I teach people. And that is what I would like to talk about, which I haven't done that on one of our shows. And the reason for talking about it today is to kind of tie it into the viral process and look at another way to help and be helpful. And I'm going to add something that I haven't added to the metaphor square breath before in today's little talk. But just to let everyone know, if you go to my website at Glenn, Glenn, Wallman, WOLLMAN.com, glennwallman.com, if you subscribe to my site, then you will get a gift of a video which completely describes the Wallman metaphor square breath in detail. So I would recommend everyone doing that. But I will also then, if you subscribe, you'll get information on this show and other things that we're doing. But I did want to talk about the metaphor square breath because I developed that for myself after working in an emergency department and realizing that sometimes things could be pretty stressful, and I needed to be unstressed quickly to make important decisions. So I would say to people that through my knowledge of neurophysiology and the endocrine system and biochemistry and martial arts and meditation, breathing is a very important part of everything we do. And in the Wallman metaphor square breath, if you can imagine or see the picture of a square, in the bottom left-hand corner is an A, and then up in the left-hand corner is B, then over is C, and then at the bottom right is D. This is the metaphor square breath. If you think about it, when a person is born, the first thing that they do in life that declares that they're an individual is to take a deep breath. And that's inspiration, and we make that inspirational. So the first part is to take in a nice deep breath. And I talk about it because it's a four square, then everything has to do with fours. So we take in a breath for, at the beginning, 4 seconds. But as you get better and better at the program, you can take it for a count of 4. So you can make it last longer or shorter. But as you're learning this for the first time, just do 4 seconds. So you take in a deep breath And it's recommended to take in the breath through your nose and then when you exhale out through your mouth. But if you can't do that and you're not comfortable with that, just breathe any way that you're comfortable. And it's important to make the inhale last for the entire count of 4. So you don't breathe in the first second and then hold it for 4 seconds. So you breathe in for 4 seconds, and then you get up to the portion where it's the B. And at that point, from B to C, you actually hold the breath for another count of 4 or for 4 seconds. And at that point, all of the oxygen is being transmitted from the breath that comes in through the trachea into the lungs and gets taken into the cells and brought to cells all around the body. So that's a very important part, that holding of 4 seconds. When you get to the next part, the C, you exhale. And again, you do this for 4 seconds or a count of 4. And again, you don't try and exhale the entire breath in the first second and then hold it. You try and make it even and smooth and very relaxed. And you work your way down to D. Now, when you're exhaling, this is a point where you're helping the body get rid of toxins, carbon dioxide and other toxins. It also, on another note, when people are exhaling, we've done studies on people that meditate, and people get into more meditative states during an exhale rather than an inhale. And that's why people, or at least theoretically, that's why people chant. That's why people pronounce things over a period of time repeatedly. Those are all forms of exhaling. Once you exhale everything, and this is the critical point, this is when you go from the bottom right, where it's D, back to A. This is where you hold the exhale. So after you've exhaled everything, don't immediately take in a deep breath. This will allow you to get to another higher state of meditation, and it produces hormones that allow you to relax more and therefore reduce the stress. And again, from a metaphoric point of view, we talked about the first thing a person does when they come into the world is take a deep breath. The last thing that a person does when they leave the world is exhale and not take in any more breath. So the whole metaphor is it's a life cycle. And we have 4 sides to it: inhale, hold, exhale, hold. We do it 4 times. So we go through a sequence of doing it 4 times at a time of 4 seconds or a count of 4 on each portion. And then the thing that I always suggest is to do it 4 times per day. So I wonder, Christina, do you think maybe we should do one to help people get a better picture of it, or do you think that covered it?
Oh, no, I think you should do one.
Okay, then let's pretend that I'm
like
going
doing,
to teach
right?
you. Doing. We are, well, we're human beings, so we should be, but we should also be human doings.
Doings.
So we should do. So between being and doing, let's do one. So as the representative of every person, Christina, I'm going to teach it to you, even though I know you're already a user and a convert. So the first thing to do, remember, breathe in through your nose, out through your mouth. And if you can, try and use abdominal breathing. If you can't breathe in through your nose or out through your mouth and you can't do abdominal breathing, it's just as important just to breathe. So let's just relax for a moment, Christina, and then let all of your breath out. Okay, now hold it for a moment and get ready. We're going to start, and I will count, and we'll do it 4 times. So the first part will be a breath in for 4 seconds. Ready? Breathe in. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. Inhale. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. In. Hold. out, hold, in, and then at this time, you just start breathing quietly. And this is a good thing to do when you are going to meditate, before an exercise, when you need to relax, calm down for a few minutes. You can do it as many times in the day as you want. And it's a good idea as you start learning it to maybe take your pulse before you do it, or check in with yourself and see if you're very nervous. And then at the end of the sequence of 4 rounds of breathing, the 4 square, see how you feel differently. It definitely works. Now, how did you feel after that?
Oh, good. I love this. I usually do it up to 8 counts now, though.
Yeah.
It's amazing how it's almost like a muscle. It begins to stretch, and you are able to actually inhale because you're conscious. You are able to inhale and extend it longer and hold longer, and it's a great feeling because it completely grounds the body. It's wonderful.
It grounds the body. And if you get into a meditative state with it and start visualizing it, the toxins going away, the oxygen coming in, the healing processes, all of that is really beneficial for everyone to do that. And I really recommend it.
And so simple,
now, I would say,
Glenn.
It's very simple. Now, I'll say when I talk with meditators, there are people that speak about different types of breath. Breathe in, hold it, breathe out twice as long, breathe out 5 times as long. There are a number of different breaths, and I'm certainly not saying that all of them don't work. This seems to be the one that works best for me. It's the easiest to remember because it has all the parts to it. You should not avoid the holding on the part where you inhale or the part where you hold it on the exhale. Those are very beneficial, and they're not always covered in some of the others. Not that they don't get the same results in terms of meditative states. If you're doing it for a meditative state, I usually start with my 4 square breath, and then once I reach the 4th one and finish it, then I go into a different type of breathing where I just breathe in and out quietly. And then this is the part where I want to bring up something a little bit new that I haven't talked about before, but another benefit, and I'm going to try and tie it into our virus talk today, is that, interestingly, we always listen to people, and when they're teaching us to meditate, they say, feel the breath, be the breath, be aware of the breath, feel it going into your lungs and all of that. You've been involved in that, right?
Yes, absolutely. So many forms of it. As you're right, there's so many forms of breathing for meditation. But I don't use yours for meditation, though.
No, I don't use mine for meditation either. I use mine as a transition to go from my attention in the outside world to going inside. I use that to start my meditation. And then once I've calmed myself and I know that I'm prepared for meditation, I do go into a different breathing, as I said.
Yeah.
So I use that, and I really do recommend as a transition, not necessarily for the meditation, but as a transition to go from regular breathing into meditative breathing. The metaphor square breath is really good. I think if you try to do that, next time you might see some different results, but we don't know. Everybody's different. As we learned today with viruses, it creates diversity. So you and I are different in that respect. But one of the things that I wanted to tie in today is when you're doing the metaphor square breath, aside from all the other things, especially at this time when we're talking about the viruses, is to concentrate on the sound of your breath. Now, most people don't do that because they're busy being the breath or the warmth of the breath or something else. But I want you, and this will go back to a question you asked and that the person that wrote in asked a little bit. when you're doing the breathing in and out, listen to the actual breath. A normal breath should be very clear without any other noises in it, just an in-breath and an out-breath, like it's all the same, or it's all quiet, it's all flowing, it's beautiful. But if you hear either a wheezing or a whistling or a crackling or a bubbling, some of these sounds could be the first indicators that you are developing a respiratory problem. Now, this may happen, nothing to do with a virus. It might happen if you develop asthma, or if you have chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, or you're just starting to get it. If you pick this up early by listening very carefully from the very beginning of the breath, the inhale, all the way to when it stops, and then from the very beginning of the exhale all the way to when it stops. If you start hearing noises that are not the normal noises you're used to, then that is an indicator that something is going on inside your lungs. And it may be the very first indicator, long before there's a fever, long before there's an x-ray, long before there's a cough, or spitting up blood, or something like that. So this is something that I'm adding to this today, only for the Magical Medical Tour people and the Yoga Hub people to know, is that the Metaphor Square Breath has a diagnostic capability to it.
Great. That's a great point. So, thank you, Glenn.
Yeah, you're welcome. Now, I believe that in one of our talks, you talked about having asthma as a child. So you know what that wheezing sounds like.
Sounds right? Like, feels like, yes.
Feels like all of that. Right. So it becomes one of those things where you may have the ability to pick up different sounds that you can then share with your doctor, and the doctor may be able to find something before it becomes something very critical and can be treated more easily. So we've talked about the virus. We've talked about viruses. We've talked about the MERS virus, the one that's out there. And again, no panic at this point. It's not in this country. We may find out exactly what's causing it and eradicate it before it ever gets past 64 people. But just in case, we've already talked about what to do a little bit, staying healthy. And we talked about the Metaphor Square Breath as part of stress reduction and things like that. Anything else you want to talk about today?
Oh, well, we could always carry on and on, Glenn. Sure. Okay. Glenn, there's something that you usually share with us that is so important about any kind of illness that we could be around, which is washing your hands, keeping the hands washed. I know you spoke about the surgical mask and things like that, but some of those simple things like keep those hands washed. And I don't know, how do you feel about those antibacterial hand washes with all the alcohol? I mean, there's been a lot of controversy about that now.
Yeah, I think the easiest thing, we can get into, you could end up, especially if you're traveling, you could have an entire bag filled with all sorts of things. It almost becomes like Alice in Wonderland, one pill to make you small, one to make you tall, one to keep your hands clean. I think the best thing to do, soap and water usually. Sometimes if you want, a little bit of alcohol might do it. But again, you also have protective bacteria on your hands. So, and those work to prevent certain things from breaking through the skin barriers. So you just want to keep clean. And when you're, and I think I said this, but just in case I didn't, and I'm glad you brought it up again, when you are cleaning your hands, the way, if you just kept things on your hands and had the virus on your hands, nothing may happen. The problem is that you then take your hands, after shaking hands with someone who just coughed, has the virus on their hands. Now you picture this virus or many viruses on your hands. And then you rub your face or put your hand to your mouth or to your nose, and that's where it gets in. It goes in through the nasal mucosa or the oral mucosa, and it starts setting up camp. And then it starts colonizing. And when it gets to critical mass, it's in your body and it's producing, it enters cells, it changes the virus sequencing and the genetic sequencing and causes the body to react. And hopefully the body's immune system has enough recognition and can do it in the right amount of time, where the cold or the virus just lasts for 2 days or 3 days or a week and a half to 2 weeks, and then it's gone. It's when the immune system doesn't work on it. But yes, definitely cleaning your hands.
Yeah, I know some body workers that will not shake people's hands. They'll hug them before they shake their hands because of that same reason. It's like they feel that if they shake someone's hand, and because they're just about to go into a massage, even though they wash their hands, they don't even want anything on their hands, away from that clean oil.
Yeah,
So,
I agree. I see that a lot. And I honor people like that, especially people that may feel sick on their own. I love seeing people walking around with a surgical mask. To me, it's a high level of civility. Maybe they're doing it because they're trying to be protective and not catch something, but I always like to believe that maybe they have something and they are trying to keep me from getting it. So I honor them for that. And when I work with people that have cancers and are on chemotherapeutic medications and their immune systems are down, I honor when they don't want to shake hands with people. I really do. Sometimes we shake elbows or something.
Yeah, that's cute. Glenn, where can we pick up the surgical masks? I mean, are they available in drugstores now?
Yeah, you can go to most drugstores, and again, these are specific types of. These are simple surgical masks. When you get into certain types of diseases, they require special filters. So the regular surgical masks that you see on ER or hospital shows, those are pretty good, but they're not going to stop every little nanovirus from getting through them. So there are special filter masks that are usually harder to get, but sometimes you can call a local public health department, and if there is an outbreak going on, they may be supplying them. I know up here where I am, we are part of an emergency response team. And when we've had certain outbreaks or when we've had bad fires going on, we set up little tables in different communities out in front of popular food stores and things like that, giving out masks to people. But for the general mask, you could probably go to the drugstore. You can even possibly go. There are some other types of masks. You can go to home improvement places and hardware stores where a lot of people work, where they're working with lumber, or people that are painters that are working with oil. Sometimes there are much more sophisticated masks with better filters.
Yes, with chemicals.
I have a question. What about like using a bandana in the event that you don't have a mask? Would a bandana, even stop anything, or is that almost useless?
Well, there's a few things. First of all, it could be controversial because many people might think you're about to rob them or you're the Lone Ranger or something. Second, it could be a fashion statement if it's a very nice bandana. And third, it will probably help similarly to the regular surgical mask. It certainly might help in certain cases. However, I would want to make sure that bandana is not one that you've been using to blow your nose for the last 2 weeks, and it's been in your pocket. And now you take it out to, protect yourself from viruses. So yes, it will help a little bit, but it won't be as good as a one of the real specific type of mask. But if I had no other choice, I would put a bandana on. In fact, there are many times that I will just, slip my shirt over my face if I have just a few minutes, or, there are different things, a handkerchief or something like that. Yeah, it definitely would help, especially if you're in a place where you're really exposed to something and you're about to get out of there. It limits your exposure a little bit. And I think anything you can do to eliminate or limit exposure is an excellent gambit.
Would that be similar to fire? They say if you can take like a wet cloth or a napkin and you can wet it. Does the water help anything? Like with smoke, it helps, but for viruses, if I'm on a plane, should I grab a napkin and douse it with water and hold it to my face? Is that something that's
probably not going to help that, Nat? not necessarily the paper type napkin, but and again, you don't really have to wet it in this particular case. The bandana would help a little while, but then after you get off the plane, very good idea to do the other things we spoke about. Go and wash your face, wash your hands, and maybe at some point during the day or before you go to sleep that night, do a neti pot or wash out a little bit of the insides of your nasal cavities, the nares and up into the nasal cavities, and gargle a little bit maybe. Those things, because those are the areas where the virus, as I said, sets up camp and starts to colonize. So if you could wipe that out and wash that away quickly, you may never get the virus. That kind of technique has worked for me through my many years in the emergency department. There were times kids were coughing in my face and during flu seasons, and because I followed those rules, I rarely got sick. I rarely picked up the viruses. And of course, I did the other things too, which were to try and stay healthy, eating right and exercising and keeping stress down and sleeping well and all the other things. But that's a good question also, from a practical point of view. Anything you can do, keep those little nanovirus particle, non-living, living things.
Good, bad, ugly.
The good, the bad, and the ugly.
There you go.
So as I said, we're coming to the end, I think.
Yes.
And I have a health tip.
Oh, good.
That I would like to share with everyone, if you don't mind.
Oh, absolutely.
I went to a public screening the other night of a movie called Following the Ninth, in the footsteps of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. It's by Kerry Kandel. He's an independent filmmaker, and he's looking for funding for his film. And it's basically a film that shows the global impact of Beethoven's Ninth on the world in different places where major things happen, like China and Tiananmen Square, in Berlin when the wall came down, in Chile when a dictator took over and was torturing people, in Japan, and a number of other parts of the world where they play the ninth and they sing Schiller's Ode to Joy. And in this movie, it was just fascinating. And I started thinking about the Ode to Joy, which I love. It's one of my favorite pieces in Beethoven's Ninth. So please, all of you German-speaking people, excuse me for my attempt at German, but at one part of the Ode to Joy, it says, Alle Menschen werden Brüder. And it means all people are connected. And so what my tip for the day is that I think everyone should take a moment out of each day and consider an ode to joy.
That's lovely. Thank you so much, Dr. Glenn Woolman. That is a lovely moment that we should all take. You're absolutely right. And let that manifest. Let that become viral.
Let that go viral.
Let
we
that
are
go
all connected. I like that. That's beautiful. And at this time, Christina, I would like to thank our special guest, myself, and my special doctor's bag. And I would like to say thank you to you, of course, and to Segovia and all of the Yoga Hub people for putting the show together under sometimes viral circumstances. And I look forward to seeing each of you again next week as we explore another quadrant of the healthcare galaxy. And until that time, I wish you all optimal health.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Glenn Woolman. That was good fun. Every time we climb into that doctor's bag of yours, we always have a great time. And thank you, Segovia and the Yoga Hub team, for making all this possible. And of course, we would like to thank each and every one of you for joining us in this new platform of education and information. We're grateful for your continuous support, and we look forward to hearing your feedback on how we can serve you better. We invite you to join us live on Tuesdays for Magical Medical Tour at 10:30 a.m. Pacific, 1:30 Eastern, Wednesdays for Trinity of Life at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern, followed every other week with Flowing into Awareness with Anatara. May I remind you to connect with Dr. Glenn Woolman by following him on Twitter at Glenn Woolman, and of course through his own site, glennwoolman.com, where we encourage you to learn more about his Metaphor Square Breath, as you might have done today, and continue to practice it, and you will see wonderful results. We're always grateful for any feedback, so please be sure to take a moment and give us a call at 818-LETS-TALK. 818-LETS-TALK. Thank you again for joining us. Until next time, namaste. YHTV's Trinity of Life. Come join me, Christina Suzama, as I journey to find the many modalities that support individuals, from children to adults to elders, with topics ranging from health and wellness, meditation, and inspirational stories. I invite you to visit yogahub.tv every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern.
Viruses are amazing. And the more that we learn about them, they're almost little, and I think Segovia would love this. They're actually, in a way, they're more like robots than living organisms.
Well, that's sort of what it sounds like. I mean, really, now I mean, you can understand why they have that term also in the computer world, in cyberspace. Right. That's all it takes. Right. It's just one little insertion of one of these little guys, and it destroys.
Yes.
Seek and destroy, and destroy, you know.
It's exactly what it is. And it's all about genetic sequencing.
Wow.
That's all that's what it is. It destroys things, or it changes things. The virus, if the virus is on your desk, it's not reproducing itself. It can't.
Interesting.
And it can't feed on something. It has to get in.
So when they say, like, for example, if somebody touches this doorknob and then you come up and you touch this doorknob next, you're able to contract the virus. Is that not true?
Again, there are over 3,000 types of viruses, so each one may have its unique characteristics. But let's say in many of the viruses, the virus gets on your hands. Well, it's not an infection at that moment. It's simply a particle. It's got protein in it, it's got DNA in it, it's got RNA in it, and it has a prime directive. It has a mission. But it's incapable of completing that mission until and unless it gets into a cell that is living, that has the ability to metabolize and reproduce. Because if it uses the other cell, it's also a parasite in a way. It comes into the cell, it uses the cell's metabolism, and that's where it starts taking the cell and saying, this is how I want you to reproduce. As you reproduce the next time, as you become your next cell, we're going to change a little sequence in here. And then it becomes a cell that's a viral cell rather than the normal liver cell or the normal lung cell. And when it changes it, then it goes on and keeps changing, and that cell now has the virus, so it continues to reproduce more of that virus. And that's how you get infected. So if it doesn't get into your cells and it just remains on your fingernails, for example, you're not going to get sick.
I see. Okay. Wow. Well, we didn't go into how do you get rid of it.
Well, because we don't at this point. That's what the CDC is trying to figure out now. They don't know enough about it yet to figure out the vaccine.
Because they have a vaccine for SARS, right?
They have a vaccine for SARS.
Right.
They do not have a vaccine yet for MERS because it's too new. They don't have enough information on it.
On a statistical level, how many humans have to be contracting this virus to actually get enough data? I mean, like, if we look at the last 100 viruses that have plagued society, that as far back as we can accurately track, I mean, do we need the the numbers to be in the tens of thousands. Has that number statistically dropped? Like once upon a time, 150, 300, 500 years ago, it took entire nations out before we learned enough, or we didn't even know anything about, why or how it killed us. It took out a civilization. Whereas now, on a statistical layer, are we getting less and less people need to contract the virus because advanced, scientists and biology can figure things out faster, or are we just sort of still bumping along, at the same randomized rate?
No, we're getting better at it. Our techniques are getting better. We're better able to see it, recognize the sequencing more quickly. I don't know the exact number of how many people you would need, but from an epidemiological point of view, it's different than from the viral point of view, because in epidemics, they say, something isn't an epidemic until X number of people get it. Something isn't a pandemic, which is a worldwide problem, until, they have specific criteria that answers those questions. But from a purely scientific point of view, they are already starting, they've recognized some of the sequencing. But what they don't know, for example, is that the virus, as you know, they reproduce very rapidly once they get in a cell, and they have the ability to mutate also. So even if they get the sequencing correct as they try and develop the vaccine for it, by the time they develop a vaccine, it may have mutated a little bit. And so that's why they need, before they put out a vaccine, they need to know that the virus is really, this is the virus, this is the sequence, and this is what we believe we need to do to kill it. And they kill it, interestingly, with other viruses. That's what's in the vaccine. The virus has become a real tool for so many things, and it's going to be a continuing tool for many more things. As I said before, cancer therapies, many chronic illnesses, and other diseases that the virus is going to be, we're going to be able to create. And there are already certain viruses. This is an interesting thing, that they found a specific type of virus inside the body that starts out in the embryo. And what happens is that this virus is a very benign virus, but as soon as the immune system starts developing in the embryo, it recognizes it as a virus and treats it as a virus. What they're learning now is that there's a possibility that if they can get to this virus before the immune system recognizes it and considers it a virus, if they can block out the immune system on this virus, then we have the potential for the ability to, while we have a virus inside our body, to manipulate it to improve the immune system.
Wow.
So that's all the, I mean, when I talk about why I love medicine and because it's such a frontier, these are all the things that are happening on levels all the time. Everybody's looking at different ways and findings. Just finding viruses in the gut was a very interesting thing. Yeah. We always thought that we just had bacteria, and that they're working together. There are certain types of viruses called bacteriophages. So the first word, bacteria, is bacteria, and phage is something almost that eats something. These viruses go into a bacteria and live in the bacteria and help the bacteria to maintain many of the things that they're doing. So it's just pretty interesting. I mean, I'm not a virologist, obviously. There's so much more.
But you sure have fun with them.
It's the future.
Well, what about okay, so I'm a tech geek, right? And I get a virus on my computer or on my web server, or we get hacked, or somebody puts some kind of scan routine on the system. I call tech support, and whether it takes me half an hour dealing with this problem with tech support, or it takes me 2 days of dealing with problems to eradicate the server of whatever this virus is, I know who to call. There's a phone number. I'm paying for this great service, and I can call them. So I mean, I guess that's what the hospital is. It's the tech support for humans. Is that you guys are like the tech support for the virus? But who do the virus fighters, who do they call? Who does the CDC call?
The CDC calls us the virologists, the microbiologists. These are all the people that are doing the studies all the time, doing the research, that they're studying viruses. They're learning how viruses react, how they communicate, how they reproduce, how they can change. And in learning that, they're learning about our own sequences. The virus may have been the actual first living organism. If you think of it as an organism, it may have been the very first organism. So when the CDC is looking, they're talking to the scientists, the virologists, microbiologists, and then they're talking to the epidemiologists, and then they're talking to the infectious disease people and the biochemists who are developing the vaccines. All of these people are coming together behind the scenes, and then it basically comes out, and the person that you're talking to is the doctor. And the doctor is the one that gets the information from the CDC, who gets the information also from the World Health Organization, who gets the information from the scientists. The only part where there's a little bit of controversy comes when we're talking about the vaccines. And the vaccines are then produced, it's the scientists producing them, but it's the companies, the pharmaceutical companies that are producing the vaccines. And this is where a lot of controversy is. There was a recent article with another whistleblower from one of the vaccine people that was showing that basically, they're taking a vaccine with the human papillomavirus. It may only cause cancer in 3% of women or people. And yet we're making this big deal of it and forcing people to take it when in reality it might actually, in most cases, in 90 or 80 or something percent of cases, they actually, the body's immune system wipes out the virus and cures it itself. So you didn't really need the vaccine. And the things in the vaccine, as you alluded to earlier, Christina, where how do we know that, yes, we've changed this sequence, but how do we know that there's not another sequence in there that says, okay, we're curing your diabetes, but now we're giving you Parkinson's disease? So all of these things are being figured out by the microbiologists and the virologists and the bacteriologists, and they're putting it all together. And then what the pharmaceutical people do, they try to have science in it, but again, their main goal is not to save society for the sake of saving society necessarily. Part of their goal is to, to help society, certainly, and cure people. But the other part is the triple bottom line.
The triple bottom line.
Yeah, the triple bottom line. And therefore, so it's not a question of saying, okay, they're totally evil. They just need to be watched more carefully, and there needs to be regulations that say, okay, we've really cleared this. Because part of the problem also becomes people. People do nothing and do nothing and do nothing, and they watch media TV, and suddenly there's an outbreak and everyone's panicking and running to the store to buy batteries and water and surgical masks. And then the first time they cough, they start demanding a vaccine. And so if it takes X number of months to actually produce a vaccine. So by the time they produce it, there's only small samples out. So the pharmaceutical companies are driven toward mass production. They're not driven toward as much quality assurance as mass production, because you've got a society out there screaming at their doors saying, give me my vaccine. I don't want to die.
Right.
Where do I need to be the most cautious about genetically modified foods? And I think there are two examples that if folks can follow this, they will go a long, long way of making sure that they don't have GMOs in their diet. Corn and soy are the two most prevalent genetically modified foods in our common food